Good day, everyone. I am Delisha Quiros, and I will be the first reporter of our topic, which is the Analytical Psychology by Carl Jung. In this chapter, we will discuss the overview of analytical psychology, biography of Carl Jung, levels of psyche, dynamics of personality, psychological types, development of personality, and lastly, Jung's method of investigation. The overview of analytical psychology. So, an early colleague of Freud, Carl Gustav Jung, broke from the orthodox psychoanalysis to establish a separate theory of personality called analytical psychology, which rests on the assumption that occult phenomena can and do influence the lives of everyone. Jung believed that each of us is motivated not only by repressed experiences but also by certain emotionally known experiences inherited from our ancestors. These inherited images is what Jung called the collective unconscious. So this includes those elements that we have never experienced individually but which have come down to us from our ancestors. Some elements under collective unconscious become highly developed and are called archetypes. The most inclusive archetype is the notion of self realization, which can be achieved only by attaining a balance between various opposing forces of personality. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and he was the main proponent of analytical psychology. He was born on July 26, 1875. He studied medicine, but later on proceeded to study psychology, and he died in June 6, 1961. Now let's proceed to the levels of psyche. So, psyche refers to our libido. That is the energy that fuels the total personality. great deal of psychic energy is equals to high psychic value. It is with psychic energy that psychological activities are carried out. So, the psyche strives to maintain a balance between opposing qualities while at the same time actively seeking its own development, or as Jung called it, individuation. Okay, so Jung conceived of it as a non-physical space that has its own special reality. Through psyche, energy flows continuously in various directions, from consciousness to unconsciousness, and from inner to outer reality. Jung gives us three principles, beginning with the principle of opposites. Every wish or feeling has its opposite, so it immediately suggests its opposite. Like, for example, if I have a good thought, then I cannot help but to think of the opposite bad thought. In fact, it is a very basic point wherein, in order to have a concept of good, you must have a concept of bad. The second principle is the principle of equivalence. The energy created from the opposition is given to both sides equally. For example, I am holding a baby bird in my hand. So, like, there was an energy to go ahead and try to help it. But there is also an equal amount of energy to go ahead and crush it. In the end, you try to help the bird. But the question is, what happens to the other energy? Well, that will now depend on your attitude towards the wish that you didn't fulfill. So, if you acknowledge it, face it, and keep it available to the conscious mind, then the energy goes towards a general improvement of your psyche. In other words, you grow. The third and final principle is the principle of entropy. So, this is the tendency for oppositions to come together, and so for energy to decrease over a person's lifetime. Jung borrowed the idea from physics, where entropy refers to the tendency of all physical systems to run down. That is, for all energy to become evenly distributed. Let's proceed to ego. Jung described the ego as a complex of representations which constitutes the centrum of field of consciousness and appears to possess a very high degree of continuity and identity. So, Jung's notion of the ego is more restrictive than Freud's, and Jung saw the ego as the center of consciousness but not the core of personality. Ego is a complex that is not synonymous with the psyche, but it is only one aspect of the ego. Personal unconscious, all repressed and forgotten and perceived experiences of one particular person or individual. So it is unique to each of us. Under the personal unconscious, we also have the complexes. It is the content of the personal unconscious. So, in the Jungian sense, these are theme organizations in the unconscious mind centering around patterns of memories, emotions, perceptions, and wishes. So, patterns, these patterns are formed by experience and by an individual's reaction to an experience, to a specific experience. So we probably have all said at a one time or another when we have done something seemingly out of character, like, I don't know what came over me, stuff like that. So, a complex is the main unconscious and has a tendency to behave independently or autonomously so that an individual may feel that his or her behavior is out of his control. Next is collective unconscious. So, this theory is one of Jung's more unique theories. It has roots in ancestral parts of the entire species. It is sometimes referred as the objective psyche. It refers to the idea that a segment of the deepest unconscious mind is genetically inherited and is not shaped by personal experience. In short, it is the storehouse of latent memories of our human and pre human ancestry. So, under the collective unconscious, we have archetypes. These are universal inborn models of people, behaviors, or personalities that play a role in influencing human behavior. So, archetypes should also be distinguished from instinct. The archetype has no form of its own, but it acts as an organizing principle on the things we see or do. It works the same way that instinct worked in Freud's theory. Archetypes. So these are the archaic images derived from collective unconscious, a psychic counterpart to instinct, emotionally toned collection of associated images. So there are other major archetypes in the Jungian system, and these include persona, shadow, anima and animus, self and introversion and extroversion. So under the archetypes is instinct. These are the unconscious physical impulse towards an action. So the archetype itself cannot be directly represented, but when activated, it expresses itself through several modes, primarily dreams, fantasies, and delusions. The first archetype is the persona. It is the side of the personality that a person shows to the world, meaning it is your public face. So, this is a part of the personality which comes into existence for reasons of adaptation or personal convenience. So, if you have certain masks you put on various situations, such as the side of yourself that you only present to your family or to your friends. Well, now that is what we call the persona. Next is the shadow archetype. So these are the traits that we dislike or would rather ignore come together to form what Jung called the shadow. So these are the darkness and repression. It carries all the things we do not want to know about ourselves or we do not like. So this is the Jungian idea of one aspect of the personality compensating for another, that where there is light, there must also be a shadow. We should work with owning our shadow to bring it into relationship with our persona, and so provide some integration of these two complexes within our personality. The next two complexes in the personal unconscious are perhaps the most difficult to understand and the most contentious. So it is the Anima and Animus archetype. Anima is the feminine side of men, which shows irrational moods and feelings, while Animus is the masculine side of women, um, that is symbolic of thinking and reasoning. So Jung conceived of there being at another psychic level a contrasexual archetype designated as anima in the man and animus in the woman. The Great Mother archetype has its both negative and positive trait. So you see fertility and nourishment, it produce and sustain life. But at the same time, it has the power to destroy by means of devour or neglect of offspring. It is also the rebirth, fertility, and power. Wise old man is typically represented by a kind and wise old father figure who uses personal knowledge of people and the world to help tell stories and offer guidance. It has wisdom and meaning, and it symbolizes humans' pre existing knowledge of the mysteries of life. The hero archetype symbolizes a man's unconscious self, and this manifests itself empirically as the sum total of all archetypes, and therefore includes the archetype of the father and of the wise old man. So it is powerful, it overcomes obstacles, and it achieves certain goals, and also fight against odd to conquer and vanish evil. The self, according to Jung, was the sum of the total of the psyche with all its potential included. So, archetype of archetype, the most comprehensive of all archetypes. So, this is the part of the psyche that looks forward, that contains the drive toward fulfillment and wholeness. In this, the self was said to drive the process of individuation, the quest of the individual to reach his or her fullest potential. So, its ultimate symbol is mandala. Mandala is the graphical representation of the self, and it is a striving of the collective unconscious for unity, balance, and wholeness. Now let's proceed to the dynamics of personality. In this section on the dynamics of personality, we look at Jung's ideas on causality and teleology and also on progression and regression. So, causality, it holds that present events have their origin in previous experiences. So, meaning whatever happened to you before is now a cause to your present condition, while teleology is present events that are motivated by goals and aspirations for the future. So basically, um, present events that are motivated by goals and aspirations of a person. So according to Jung, humans are motivated both by their past and by their expectations to the future.
Hello everyone, this is Ellyn Cajes. This is your second reporter. So let me continue the discussion of dynamics of personality. This is also composed of progression and regression. Progression and regression. This is also under the theory of Carl Jung. Progression is the adaptation of the outside world involves the forward flow of psychic energy. The highlight word for this is the forward, while the other hand is the regression. Regression is the adaptation to the inner world relies on the backflow of psychic energy. So the highlight word here is the backflow. Jung emphasized the libido or the psychic energy flowing to every one of us. So let us proceed to the psychological types. Jung recognized various psychological types that grow out of a union of two basic attitudes. These are the introversion and extroversion, and also the four separate functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. First, let us discuss the attitude. Attitudes is the certain predisposition to act, behave, and even react in the process of our unique characteristic direction. So there were two types of this. These are the introversion and extroversion. Introverts or the introversion, these are the person who are motivated by what's on inside, and also they prefer to the reflection, dreaming, and vision. These are the persons who are maybe sociable and friendly, but they find spending extended time with other people. They are the person who gets their energy by being on their own, or the other words, the source of their psychic energy is within themselves. While on the other hand, the extroverts or the extroversion are the persons who are motivated by what's on the outside. These are the persons that they enjoying spending time with others. In the other words, this their psychic energy is going outside. So we will discuss the function. Aside from the two types, there are also function. These are the thinking, the feeling, the sensing, and the intuiting. By combining the types and functions, we form many different psychological types. So one of these is the thinking. Thinking is the logical intellectual activity that produces a chain of ideas. So we have the introverted thinkers and the introverted thinkers. So the second one is the feeling. Feeling is describe the process of evaluating ideas or event. Valuing is the more accurate term. So we have the introverted feeling and introverted feeling. The third function is sensing. Sensing receive physical stimuli and transmit them to the perceptual consciousness is called sensation. So we have the introverted sensing and introverted sensing. So lastly is the intuiting. Intuiting is the perception beyond the workings of consciousness. So we have the introverted intuitive and extroverted intuitive. So let us discuss the development of personality. As you can see, we have a simple diagram here. This reflects from going from childhood to the old age. For example, the childhood represents the early morning, the youth as the morning sun, and the middle life where it reached the zenith, which we call the late morning sun, and the old age is the evening sun. And according to Carl Gustav Jung, that is the goal of life. So the first one is the childhood. This where the consciousness of the child is developed through the different phases. The first phase is the anarchic phase. It is the chaotic and sporadic consciousness, little or no connection. The second is the monarchic phase. It is the development of ego and beginning of logical and verbal thinking. The third one is the dualistic phase. This is the ego is divided into the objective and subjective. Children refer themselves in the first person and are aware of the existence and separate individuals. So the second one is youth. This is the period from puberty until middle life called youth. This is strive to gain psychic and physical independence from parents, find mates, raise a family, and make a place in the world. So, conservative principle, it is the desire to live in the past. The third one is the middle life. This is approximately 35 or 40. The sun passed its zenith and begins its downward descent. So this is the people who have lived youth by neither childish nor middle age values are prepared to advance to middle life and to live fully during that stage. And lastly, the old age. These are the people experience decrease of consciousness and they believe death is the goal of life. This is also according to Carl Gustav Jung. So we are done discussing the development of personality. Now we will proceed to the self-realization. Psychological rebirth is the process of becoming an individual or whole person. Process of integrating the opposite poles into single homogeneous individuals. So self-realization, this happens when you become or when you're trying to accept everything. This is the uniqueness of our archetypes of ourselves. So this is the second to the last topic that I will discuss, the Jung method of investigation. So the first one is the word association test, uncovering feeling tone complex based on the principle that complex creates measurable emotional response. So Jung used the word association test in his career to uncover complex embedded in the personal unconscious. The technique requires a patient to author the first word that comes to the mind after the examiners read a stimulus word. The second one is the dream analysis. Uncover elements from the personal and collective unconscious and to integrate them into the unconsciousness in order to facilitate the process of self-realization. So, Jung believed that dreams may have both a cause and a purpose and thus can be useful in explaining past events in making decisions about the future life, about the about our big dreams and typical dreams, both of which come from the collective unconscious, have have a meanings that lie beyond the experience of the single individual. And lastly, the active imagination reveal the archetypal um, image emerging from the unconscious. So Jung also use active imagination to arrive at the collective images. This technique requires the patient to concentrate on a single image until the image begins to appear in a different form. Eventually, the patient should see the figure that represent the archetypes and other collective unconscious images. So, so that is the method of investigation according to Jung. So this is the last topic that I will discuss by um, Carl Gustav Jung, the psychotherapy. First is the confession of the photogenic secret. Second is the interpretation, explanation, and elucidation. Third is the education of patient. Fourth is the transformation, and the goal is to help your take patient to become healthy and to encourage healthy people to work independently towards self-realization. So that's all. So that is the end of our topic. I hope you have learned something from our discussion. Thank you for listening and God bless all of you. So this is Krizia Ellyn C. Cajes, your second reporter, signing off.